Alright, so for a lot of these videos, it's sort of all about delving deeper into the movies and maybe trying to find stuff that's, not quite on the surface, and maybe try and figure out the ins and outs of the movies and where, like, the artists that created them were coming from at the time and all that. And maybe going into theories about what certain things mean or what they may not mean or whatever. And stuff like, sometimes I like to do, like, classic movies from, like, way back in the day, and then stuff like, the Gus Van Sant video that I did and all that. And then sometimes we just do shit like this. Just because, why not? Who's to say that Spy Kids and Agent Cody Banks isn't worth still talking about in 2019? Or at least maybe one of them, anyway. So, yeah, I figure just for shits and giggles, we'll talk about giggles in more ways than one in regards to Spy Kids, given character names. I figure we'll go into this whole early 2000s double feature of sort of going in that whole direction of fulfilling that sort of, kid fantasy of adventure and all that stuff that these were doing all around the same time. Agent Cody Banks may or may not start feeling like an easy cash-in after Spy Kids did so incredibly well. Being #1 in the box office the week it came out, like 3 weeks in a row, the week it came out, and then the 2 subsequent ones. And I want to start with Spy Kids, of course, which just is really interesting right away, given Robert Rodriguez's name being on it. Because this was, the 2 movies he had done before this were The Faculty and From Dusk Till Dawn. Now, obviously, with his Troublemaker studio, he's known now for, like, splitting his filmography up from doing his crazy Robert Rodriguez shit and more child-oriented stuff. Now that his children are, like, getting significantly older, we kind of seen less of that era. That or, Shark Boy and Lava Girl and Shorts kind of killed his will to do anything else like that. And the less said about Spy Kids 4, the better. So he just kind of went into this more or less suddenly, and it just seems to come from out of nowhere when you look at his filmography and suddenly come across it. And it's kind of amazing how well it worked out for him. I know a lot of people, like, obviously this had a lot of acclaim when it came out, and people really fell in love with it, and it was huge. And it's kind of somewhat gotten this reputation now to where it doesn't exactly hold up. But there's still, and it's get to that point now to where, like, when you hear somebody praise it, I honestly cannot tell if they're being genuine or ironic, or attempting to be ironic, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know, because it's one of those cases. It was sort of like when I revisited Space Jam. It was like I watched it once after a long time having not seen it, and it was like, I don't know. But then I watched it again recently, and was, like, really into it again. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But, and let me tell you why I feel that way. That's why we're here. When I initially saw it, it was actually significantly long after the hype, because it had its whole run, and then it left theaters, and then he did that reissue where he put it back in theaters with a deleted scene in it, and that's the one that I saw in theaters. I still have that. I have the giant jar with all of my tickets in it, and this was the first one that I put. Like, this one was the start of that jar, and that's. So I carry that memory with it, but also, and I don't remember what that deleted scene was, because this is the only version I've seen since. I think that version, that reissue, like, wasn't even seen again until the Blu-ray release, like, a decade later. And I still don't know what it was, but and going into it, when it starts off immediately, you could, like, I think what really makes it work, just, like, from the very, very start, is the fact that you can, even though it's the very beginning of a movie where Rodriguez has taken an entirely different approach and taking a more childlike, way about his career, or at least his execution of these particular movies, he's still Rodriguez at the start of it. Like, this opening scene of Carla Gugino sitting down and telling them this bedtime story that's the story of how she and Banderas actually met, is so fucking cinematic. It's kind of crazy, and feels like so big, like almost bigger than some of the movies Rodriguez had made up to this point. And he had already gone like totally over the top with Desperado by this point, and From Dusk Till Dawn and all that stuff. Um, and it's like, it's so weird that when it starts, you immediately feel that it's a kid's movie, but you can still feel Rodriguez in there too. It's like, I have no idea how he did that. It's like it was always his plan or something to eventually get to this point in his career. And the fact that he was able to use his similar strengths, where usually when you think about somebody who did more kind of, I guess, you know, adult themed movies. I don't know if mature is the right word, but but then when they, like, you know, sell out or whatever, or make more kid friendly movies or family friendly movies, like sometimes it doesn't even feel like them anymore. And there's this whole thing of they just sort of completely went off their own path. And it's like he's able to do both at the same time here. I love that shot more than I probably should, of the helicopters flying over the priest as he finishes the ceremony after they're already on the boat leaving. And this is the start of it. And then, obviously, once we get this, we are introduced to the kids, and then we get that aspect of it. And we get to see, basically, their interaction and how much they don't get along, how much they act like siblings. I think the fact that they just act like siblings is what keeps them from being annoying. Because Junie, in particular, Daryl Sabara, the first time we saw him, who has since gone on to many different things in his career, is a character that very easily could have been, like, the annoying, you know, kid brother or whatever. But the thing is he is actually made sympathetic really quickly. Like, when we see him, we kind of feel Carmen's pain in regards to just how annoying he seems like he is. But then when we learn that he's, like, you know, picked on, and his friends that he talks about are actually made up, he has to watch, you know, his dad not fight the other kid's dad. He's kind of standing by when he sees Carmen walk by, and Carmen's just airing all her grievances to her friends about how much she just cannot stand him as a brother. And the only thing he's basically got in life is Floop's show. That's basically the only thing that's keeping him from just being totally and completely depressed by everything around him. He's even got warts. Like, everything that could go wrong with this kid is going wrong with him. So when they establish that immediately, like in the first 10 minutes, you realize how well the movie's probably going to work. Especially with how well they interact even when they're fighting. Because that's something that could also grow tiresome really quickly or really grating. But Rodriguez just seemed like he was having so much fun writing the different insults that they give each other. But also keeps it, you know, realistically childish. Like his line, you better stop calling me names, or I'm gonna call you names. And that's a line that actually comes back twice. And it's like, it's one of those cases where it feels so, like, authentic as far as children arguing with each other in this very, very, very over-the-top world. Where he just kind of threw everything into it. Because we've got this plot, obviously, of the missing secret agent played by Mike Judge, of all people. Richard Linklater is supposed to be in there somewhere, but I still haven't spotted him. But I think it's only because I keep forgetting to look for him. But the thing also is, and the whole plot might seem kind of pointless, because the whole idea is to rescue Donegan, the Mike Judge character, despite the fact that he's going to be the bad guy in the second movie. So it's like, anything that's done here would have been for the better in regards to the second movie, but still. It's also talking about that, and the mission that it starts off with is the other thing that really makes it work, that really has to make it work, after we've established that the kids will be fine in regards to how everything works. The adult actors are just really, really committed to this in a really great way. Because you've got Banderas, and Banderas can be, like, you know, he's still, like, you know, the really suave guy and the really cool guy. We can still see, like, El Mariachi in him a little bit in this. But then he's also got to be the dorky dad. But then he also gets to be funny a lot, too, which I really like, and gets some physical humor throughout it also. And some of his line exchanges with Tony Shalhoub, all of that, just all the different facets of what he does with Gregorio just really work well. And then, obviously, Carla Gugino's, like, you know, childlike excitement of when they're going to take on another job, the way she says, I want to save the world to him. It's like you can just tell how into this they are, and that's to not even bring up who I think is the real star of this movie. Of course that's Alan Cumming, as Floop, who we believe to be our villain for a while. And obviously, you know, Alan Cumming's got those stage roots, so if you want Alan Cumming to go over the top, he will go so far above and beyond that he will be an entirely different fucking universe in the best possible way. And here, he's the perfect casting choice of, like, this sort of sinister Willy Wonka-like person who has this really weird-ass, giant effects-heavy TV show that basically feels like he's got that whole song number by Danny Elfman in the middle of the movie that's basically like, it's almost like you're being brought into a cult with the way this song goes and the way he performs it and is inviting you in. And also the fact that he's basically just an entire Dickens reference, an Oliver Twist reference, because the whole Floop thing is that he's building this child army. So he's basically he's a grown dude who's getting children to basically do his dirty work for him. And lo and behold, his first name is Fagin. It's like, I don't know why. We even did the Oliver Twist play in school, and for some reason that went right the fuck by me. When it's clear as day. And it's actually, I like the development of his character, particularly with the way he interacts with Junie, and how Junie kind of turns him over and is able to change his show for the better. But in my heart, in a little bit, it's a tad disappointing, because I really, really, really love Villain Floop. For the time that we have him. Especially his delivery of, like, we see the Thumb-Thumbs, these really ridiculous creatures that exist. Apparently they're based on drawings that Rodriguez did when he was a kid. But despite the silliness of the Thumb-Thumbs' existence, I love the line so much, where Gregorio's getting ready to attack him and he says, if I snap my fingers snap you. And it's like this, it's almost a Bond villain line. And it's delivered so perfectly. And, you know, Alan Cumming had already been in a Bond movie just 6 years prior, so he already had practice. So there you go. And then there's the whole idea of his interaction with Tony Shalhoub as the properly named minion, who is the minion that will ultimately be our actual villain. I think apart from Men in Black, this might have been the first time I got a glimpse of Tony Shalhoub. And I didn't put it together that Minion and Jeeves were the same person for a long time. Because that's the brilliance of Tony Shalhoub, and the narrow-mindedness of my child self. But this whole thing of, like, one of their interactions, like, shortly after he's done the song, and he comes in and he's trying to figure out what's missing. And Minion's telling him to focus more on the show. And he's saying, like, don't you think we should focus more on our grand diabolical plan? And Floop's response is syndication. And just little lines like that kind of always went by me back then that I really love, and really makes me appreciate Alan Cumming's performance even more. Not to mention Floop as a character, I guess. So, and just the stuff with Shalhoub also, where he's like this real genuine villain. Like the line where he says, when we went up against the Cortezes before, they didn't have any weaknesses, and it's like now they have two. And it's this whole sinister thing about them going after the kids. But then there's also just some of the sort of funny stuff where we never take anything too seriously. We can't in this environment. But they're also willing to play that up. Like this, I always love the silent moment where Robert Patrick's getting ready to come back, and Minion's just attempting to sit in the hand. And he's failing. Just little things like that just work throughout the entire movie as they're there. And so, of course, I think one of the things that a lot of people think maybe doesn't hold up is, obviously Rodriguez is known, which I don't know why you'd hold this against him, because that's his whole point, that's his whole style. The whole point is that Rodriguez works on low budgets, even when he's doing something that looks like it's huge. So, like, anytime the CGI looks maybe a bit cartoony, or whatever. Number one, I feel like it fits the style of the movie itself, with how everything, like, when you look at Floop performing his song, and it's like, it's a green screen effect, obviously, but it's also made to look like a green screen effect, because that's what it is in the context. But there's also just something in general also that, like, like, especially how there's a whole concept of, the Foogly that Gregorio turns into is the drawing that Junie did, and then the whole idea that the Thumb Thumbs are based off drawings that Rodriguez did as a kid. And it's like, that's another thing where it makes sense if it looks like really almost animated in its effects, because it almost feels like just a child's fantasy and like a child's drawing, just the whole damn movie. And so like all the set designs are like really weird, and everything is like so like it's just sort of constantly creative, whether it be the stuff that the children come in contact with. Even that's even before they get to Machete's place where he's got all his shit. All the tech stuff, all the set designs in Floop's castle. Floop's castle itself, everything is just like bursting with creativity. And it's like and it's supposed to be like silly and childlike. That's the whole damn point. So I think it just really fits just thematically in general, but also just on an aesthetic level. It's amazing how much it works. It should not work this well at all. It should be a passable movie that you're like, that's harmless and my kids will like it. It should not be this well put together, but it is. And that's because you have somebody like Rodriguez making it, who just loves this shit, who just loves just creating from the bottom up and just going as crazy and weird as possible, coming up with shit that somebody else wouldn't or ever would. It's like it's almost like he was a successor to Burton when he made this, in regards to taking, like childlike fantasy and turning it into something that actually works as something that like can entertain anybody and not just a particular age group, if you're willing to go with it. Because that was the thing I noticed also, was it really just depends on if it gets you what you're willing to, like, just accept and go for. Like some of the slapstick, like, usually that's something I would be like, they have to really, really execute that well if they're going to do it. And I found myself just laughing at stupid shit. Like when the Thumb Thumbs are flying through the store and the door closes and one of them just smacks into it. And it's like, it's your basic garden variety slapstick, but just in the moment, if the movie has you caught up enough, it's the funniest shit in the world. And that's the accomplishment of the movie, if you're willing to accept it. So, and like I said, all the childlike insults and all that. Like, if there's one thing I would have really liked to have seen more of, it's playing with the idea that Floop's Castle is like a fun house, where it has like the illusions that mess with them. I feel like they could have maybe done more of that, and that would have been interesting, and see more of like Gregorio and Ingrid sort of going through the castle before they end up getting, finding the kids again. So, yeah, and then there's the whole thing about, just to make it even crazier, people desperately want to believe that because Danny Trejo's character's name is Machete, that it's the same Machete in the Machete movies, hence making Machete and Spy Kids a shared universe, which is really fucked up and really weird. Whatever you want, apparently Rodriguez absolutely said that it's not. The only weird thing, though, is like, obviously if Rodriguez says it, you just kind of want to go with it, because, he's the fucking creator, but at the same time, his explanation was that Daryl Sabara and Alexa Vega are in Machete Kills as different characters, and Cheech is in this as Uncle Felix, when Cheech is his brother in Machete, and Machete never really mentions having another brother Gregorio that's a spy or anything like that. There just seems to not be a connection, except that it's Danny Trejo playing a character named Machete. But the weird thing about that to me is that's the explanation of, well, these characters played this in this movie, is that just a couple of movies ago he had done From Dusk Till Dawn, where Cheech played 3 characters in one movie. So that's kind of a weird defense of this not being a shared universe, that, oh, the actors played other characters. But, so yeah. So, I mean, if you want to go on, Machete and Spy Kids are a shared universe, and you want to ignore Rodriguez saying, no, that's definitely not it, if it makes it more fun for you, then fucking go for it, is what I would say. But, so yeah, like I said, I think the fact that I watched it twice, not that long ago, and one time not so much, and one time it was like, yes, I'm guessing it probably is a movie that has to catch you in a certain mood, but if it catches you in the right mood, it'll be just how you remembered it in the positive sense, assuming you liked it to begin with when it first came out, assuming. So while I'm feeling positive about it, that's what I would say about it. I don't have near as many positive things to say about Agent Cody Banks. Which basically just seems to be like, one of those, because the thing about Spy Kids is it's trying to be creative and it's kind of playing with the whole genre and stuff like that. Agent Cody Banks seems like it's basically trying to be the spy genre, but it just happens to be this goofy kids movie at heart, I guess. But it's not really doing anything to, like, have fun with the genre. It's really just trying to be it. The only way it's trying to have fun with it is, oh, it's a kid doing it. And it's like the ultimate kid fantasy, to be some secret agent or whatever. And we can live vicariously through Frankie Muniz, because that's what we were doing in the early 2000s. Because nothing says early 2000s like Frankie Muniz on a skateboard, which is exactly how this movie starts. And in it's the first instance of him, like, being secret agent-y and saving that woman's baby or whatever that was in the car going down the hill. Exactly how you expect a movie like this to begin, a scene like that. Before we go any further into this, I would like to mention that something that I noticed when it ended the last time I watched it, was something that had never occurred to me and I don't remember ever hearing about, and that is that the movie has many executive producers. But two of these executive producers, it's worth noting, are Madonna and Jason Alexander. Part of me wishes I was joking. Part of me is ecstatic that I'm not. So, and that really seems to have no bearing on this. There is no, like, physical evidence that Madonna and Jason Alexander had anything to do with this movie, except for the fact that their names are on it. Obviously, Madonna's unmistakable. I looked it up just to make sure it was the same Jason Alexander, and you better fucking believe that it is. So, with that completely unexplained, let's go into the rest of the movie. So obviously it's going to be really confusing at the start here, because it seems to want to go two directions with Cody Banks as a character. It seems to make him want to be, like, inherently cool, and, he's already, like, saving people's lives before he's even a secret agent, because we got the whole skateboard routine. But at the same time, they want to make him, like, really awkward and virginal and just weird. Like, he can't interact in, like, a real way, because he's just so awkward. Like, we get the whole point where, I kind of mentioned this in the last video with Clueless and Mean Girls, about how there was a certain insult that was running rampant at this time. And it happens twice in the movie, where the funny transition is they're building up Cody Banks' like resume and his reputation, and Keith David, like the whole head spy dude, is saying he's this and he's that and he's cool and he's sharp, but most of all he's a real lady killer. And then the punchline is that he's trying to talk to a girl at school and he's just like not getting any words out. And the girl asks him if he's in special ed. And Hilary Duff does the same thing. It happens twice. And what I love about this is apparently they had to issue an apology. And they decided that it wasn't worth cutting it out of the movie. But apparently, in like some versions of the DVD, came with like an insert saying sorry about the special ed joke. And that's all they did about it. Because they actually did get complaints about it by that time. So yeah, so it's already dated in that aspect, I guess. But then, as it keeps going, talking about this lady killer thing, despite the whole secret agent angle, he's very unsubtly picked up and taken into this by Angie Harmon in the locker room. And I gotta say, this whole Angie Harmon thing is a little weird. Also, interestingly enough, which I didn't think about till after I'd already decided to do this, apparently Angie Harmon was actually one of the first choices for Ingrid, the Carla Gugino role in Spy Kids, but she was still doing Law and Order at the time and couldn't. Spy Kids is very grateful, too, for that. So as far as Angie Harmon here, this whole joke they seem to be doing is that, I mean, obviously, Cody Banks is a teenage boy, and she's Angie Harmon, and she wears the clothes and all that, so he's gonna, like, his hormones and all that are gonna be out of control, but at the same time, though, it's almost like they're always on the verge of making this a mutual thing. Like, almost giving Cody Banks and Angie Harmon have sexual tension. And this kind of happens a lot throughout it, and it's really fucking weird and just feels really off. It's like you can see the difference here. It's like fulfilling childhood fantasies. It's like in Spy Kids, you can make McDonald's just appear. And in Agent Cody Banks, Angie Harmon might hit on you in ways that are a little too close for comfort. Alright, so there's that whole thing, which is just really weird. And then, like I said, we do have other recognizable adult actors here. I mentioned Keith David already with his weird intro where he's freaking out about how there might be something in his ice. Like if there's dust in it or something, he won't take the drink. Which I guess is weird foreshadowing. Because Cody Banks is into foreshadowing, apparently, about the fact that the supervillains use ice eventually. I don't know. Speaking of the villains, though, we have... Our villains are Ian McShane, with a skin complexion that seems to change with every other scene, and Arnold Vosloo, who you'll remember from the Mummy movies, as like his henchman. And they try to do, like, they make the villains very, generically villainy, but every now and then try to make them funny. Like, there's kind of a humorous moment where Ian McShane, despite being this, stoic supervillain, is talking to Martin Donovan, who's the scientist who's Hilary Duff's dad, and at one point just, straight up calls him a nerd like that. And then the scene at the end with Arnold Vosloo freaking out over his haircut kind of makes me laugh. But for the most part, everything about the movie from here on is just so incredibly generic and exactly what you would expect from a movie like this in 2003 to be. Because once it goes into the whole school thing, you think maybe, there'll be all kinds of, hilarity could ensue. There could be so many different situations here. But for the most part, it feels mostly like it's in montage. But then you just get scenes that are senseless. Like, there's the whole bully subplot, where Noel Fisher plays this bully that for some reason won't go away, regardless of what happens to him. So we get the scene where he bullies him, and then we get the scene where Cody fantasizes about using his spy skills on him and fucking him up in the cafeteria in front of everybody to applause. But then, of course, the payoff to that scene is going to have to be, okay, I'll just walk away and I'll get my revenge later. But the thing is he eventually gets his revenge. There's an instant karma, because he does the whole shocking thing with the watch. So what the hell was the point of the fantasy sequence if he was going to fulfill that fantasy instantly anyway, if not necessarily in the way he did in there? That is just, that makes no sense to me, that whole scene. And another thing is, it's like the scene doesn't even happen, because once they get to the party, Noel Fisher's right back to being a bully again, as if he didn't get his ass kicked the first time. And it's like it never happened, and he's still a conflict for some reason. And then after this party, that character just kind of disappears. But it's like, oh, we gotta do the bully thing because it's set in a school, and our really early teenagers, or even 12-year-olds, are our audience. This is the stuff we have to do, because that's just what goes with this material. And that's basically, it seems like how they wrote the whole thing and how they put it all together. And as far as the Hilary Duff thing goes, it is one of those places where, like, every now and then there's something kind of funny, like the way, when he starts to get impressive, the way she changes her tone when she says, he's in every single one of my classes, because it's like, obviously because he's undercover and he has to investigate her and get close to her because she's Martin Donovan's daughter, she's like, you're like in every one of my classes, like, it's weird. But then once he does something impressive, he's like in every one of my classes. So that's kind of funny, but for the most part, Hilary Duff's here because it's 2003 and she's Hilary Duff. Because obviously the whole thing's going to be, they have a connection, he ends up falling for her and all that. There's only one problem, though. There's really not much of a connection between them at all. The only connection between them, like, the only reason that he gets close enough that he has to be taken off the case when she gets kidnapped, and he has to go back for her, there's no particular emotional connection. There's no reason that he feels like he has to do this personally. It's because of her star status. It's because she's played by Hilary Duff that he suddenly has the connection. The romantic connection, I guess. They went on like a half-date thing, and in the middle of it's when she got kidnapped and instantly found out his secret, so there's really nothing there character-wise. That's the only way it takes. And then of course he has to rescue her. That's why. That's the only reason he has to go after her, because the movie needs a climax, not because there was any connection between them. Come on. So we go into all that stuff, and every now and then we have moments where like we have the bumbling agents to try to give him dating advice and all that. Daryl Hammond is here. He's trying hard and he kind of succeeds sometimes, but for the most part, it's just all the same shit. I guess you could say something about the production design of like the layer and all that, when it's actually trying to be a spy movie for some reason. But I mean, once it gets into the action portion, it's like the action isn't particularly exciting, and it's not necessarily that it's like not like it's executed poorly, like it's not like it's over edited or anything. It's just it's just kind of bland. It's like, hey, like with Spy Kids, you were wondering what the hell other thing that like Machete had or something that was going to get them elaborately out of or creatively out of a certain situation. Or like the situations they found themselves in, or the action scene in Spy Kids, where like Johnny comes down, he's surrounded by thumbs, or you've got the army of kids and all that. You've got underwater shit, you've got flying shit, all this stuff. Here, you've got going down snowy mountains, and cars that drive fast, and skateboards that fucking, I don't know. I don't fucking know. It's just here, and it's like, oh, the movie's making noise. This means that children are occupied. Great. And that's it. And they even tried to do, like, Mission Impossible inspired, like, the lab scene. But there's just nothing here of worth. It's just really feels like it's going through motions, and it's like I said, it's not even trying to send up the spy genre. It's just trying to be it. And it's like, if maybe what would have made Cody Banks really interesting is if, like, maybe instead of trying to be a child version of Bond, what if it was like a child version of Austin Powers, where like they just really went with making fun of the spy genre. I feel like that could have been more fitting and more interesting and opened itself up to a lot more possibilities, especially in regards to humor, but no, it just wants to be some bland spy movie for kids, and that's all that it is. And I had almost completely forgotten every single thing that happened in it, and I watched it again recently kind of for the sake of this. But after I've talked about it, I'm not even going to remember what I've just said to you. That's how forgettable Cody Banks is. Like, doing this is not going to help my memory of it. So, so I don't know what that says. So, needless to say, I think Spy Kids accomplishes everything so much better than something like this does. And obviously we had, the sequel where they brought Steve Buscemi into it to talk about God, and Bill Paxton, and then, the 3D movie that is what it is, but I mean, it's better than 4. I'll say that. Now, this is the point now where I would talk about Agent Cody Banks 2, Destination London, where they brought in Anthony Anderson. The only trouble is that's the only fucking thing I remember about it, is its title and that Anthony Anderson was in it. I think it started at that, like, they had like a summer camp front and the parents came to visit. I remember the beginning. Other than that, no. I don't remember who else was in it, what the story was, nothing. But maybe I'll revisit it out of morbid curiosity since I went ahead and revisited this one. Because, it's not like life's too fucking short or anything. So, yeah, so that's what these are. So once again, one in a long line of like a lot of these you'll be getting as I play catch up. So that's what we have here, and we'll have reviews and all that stuff coming, more of Peele's Twilight Zone and all that other stuff. So until all that stuff, that's it for this.